Quiet, Riot.
You two are so intimidating.
No, we're not.
No, they're not.
Yeah, they are.
Hello and welcome back once more to Quiet Riot with me, Alex and Naomi.
And me, Naomi Smith. This is the show that lowers the temperature but still wraps you in warmth.
A politics podcast that embraces doubt, challenges the status quo and gives you ideas for making the world a better place.
Thank you so much for tuning in, for sending us your feedback and for hanging tough with this new kid on the block.
Step by step with you, we are now regularly in the charts and are the only show to do so with the support of
Without.
I just said with no major.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Bloody hell. And are the only show to do so without the support of any major media backer. We couldn't be more grateful.
So top up that Aperol, recline that lounger, and together, let's begin a quiet riot.
Welcome back to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi.
And I'm producer Kenny with my stopwatch and a big box of muzzles as well.
On this week's show, Biden has fallen on his sword. The great and good of the Democrats are giving Kamala their blessing, while Trump's unsure if he'll carry Vance full term. We delve into the latest from the USA.
And we share our thoughts on the heaving to-do list of the new Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, Lisa Nandy. Plus, we'll touch on the latest goings-on in Parliament. 7 Labour MPs have already lost the whip for 6 months and Starmer had his first PMQs.
Mercifully, we're not alone to unpack it all, and I can barely contain my delight to be welcoming our first guest, making their Quiet Riot debut. It's the writer, the actor, the broadcaster, the multi-talented, beautiful, wonderful, our dear friend, Ingrid Oliver. Welcome, Ingrid!
Thank you. Isn't this lovely?
Nice.
Reunited, and it feels so good.
Reunited in our old home where we recorded another show back in the day.
Exactly right. I'm so delighted to be here with your new project. Well, it's not new anymore, is it? It's
about 2 months old now.
2 months.
Yeah,
basically. Yeah,
exactly 2 months. Actually.
And Ingrid, you just finished a run with the Royal Shakespeare Company playing a young Angela Merkel in a production about the negotiations behind the Kyoto Protocol. Having studied her so intently for the part, and guys, when this show comes to London, you have to go and see it. It is phenomenal. What would you think the first female German Chancellor would be advising the first would-be woman POTUS?
Do you know what? I did study Angela Merkel. I read a lot about her. I watched that Netflix documentary about her, and I've absolutely. I mean, I liked her before, but I've slightly fallen in love with her. Her role in dealing with Trump, for example, is a different one than Kamala Harris is going to have in the next few months. She was trying to work with him, find a way of sort of being able to deal with him. And so that involved a lot of research. She literally, before she met him for the first time, when he was made president, she said, "I'm going to let Theresa May. She can meet him first. I don't need to be the first one to meet him. I need to.
Amazing.
I want to know who he is." So she literally read his Playboy magazine interview that he did sort of decades ago. Read The Art of the Deal, watched The Apprentice. Would Google his tweets. She wasn't on Twitter, but she would Google his tweets, so she knew exactly who she was dealing with before she met him. So she found a way of working with him, which I think. Kamala Harris, she's obviously, she is now going to be in opposition for the next couple of months. And so that is quite a different strategy. I would say Merkel's thing was always know your stuff, know all the detail, be across all of it. And she knew that Trump, for example, was not able to, he couldn't
fight fire with fire.
He literally could not, he couldn't cope with any information beyond half a page worth of information. So he just couldn't retain it.
Couldn't point to Germany on a map.
Exactly, all of those things. So she was able to be the person who everyone respected in a room, that he also grudgingly respected in a room because she had done her research. So Kamala Harris is a tricky one, isn't it? She just has to know her stuff.
There's a brilliant interview that Matt Ford did, the comedian, where he says that when you study Trump to do him as a character, you notice that he freezes when he gets on stage and has that moment of panic where he goes, "Shit, I wish I'd done my research." But he never does. And he then sort of bumbles his way through, Germany, amazing country, great people, and you can hear the brain going, what the hell can I remember about Germany, or whatever the topic is, and he just can't do it.
Yeah, exactly that. And as someone And that's maddening. And I'm not saying, listen, not all men, but I have definitely worked in places where that is a trait of.
I mean, I do far more work on this podcast than Kenny and I. Far more.
I'd like to say hashtag not all men, not apart from Alex. So all men apart from Alex and Kenny and Patrick, obviously, other guests who's sitting here.
Becoming an issue.
But I've definitely worked in rooms where women do so much more work because they feel they have to, because they don't want to be caught out and don't want to feel like imposters in the room. So I imagine that's what's going on. But yeah, how do you fight someone who doesn't care about any of those things, and a base who's maybe not as interested in those things as we would like? So yeah, she's got her work cut out for her. If you were suggesting that Angela Merkel would be giving advice to a future POTUS because you think she's going to win,
she is.
I mean, that's lovely.
Come on.
Yeah, all right,
you do it, girl.
That's a whole different thing, but we'll get
into
I'll come
that.
back on to talk about that when she wins.
Alex, you were watching PMQs today. It was obviously Starmer's first as Prime Minister. What did you make of his performance? I caught a very tiny bit of it at the end. I was actually coming back from Parliament when it began, and it seemed to me that the Tories were kind of softballing their questions.
Oh yeah. It was weird. It was incredibly polite, and everyone was trying to find consensus, and very few people were shouting, and there were no party political points being made, and Sunak decided to go in defence and foreign policy and basically say, you were really good to me on that stuff when you were opposition, and I will be the same. So I will, as long as you provide me with information, I will support you all the way in all these areas.
Did any would-be Tory leadership contender get a question?
No, none of the sort of big notable ones. I think Cleverly is the only one that has
declared,
formally declared. What do we think about Cleverly? What do you think about Cleverly? Yeah, I mean, he's generally considered one of the
So a couple of months ago, people were asking me who's going to be Sunak's obviously going to lose the election, and I said Cleverly's underpriced, but then I said Mordaunt was underpriced 2-3 years ago. So what do I know?
Yeah, it was a very different atmosphere. That might be because it's end of term, and they always go a little bit softer and funnier end of term. It might be because it's all very new. And they're all getting used to their new roles.
I mean, even Starmer accidentally called him Prime Minister yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, really? That's funny.
Yeah, and he was like, old habits.
Die hard.
But it was a different atmosphere. More pressure and more prickly questions came from behind Starmer than from opposite him. But you would expect that, again, with 400-odd MPs. I think that's quite healthy. And, of course, first vote yesterday in the King's Speech, 7 had the whip suspended temporarily for 6 months, which I've never heard of before. It's like they're like on probation.
Yeah.
So he's put them on suspension for 6 months and said, you still have to vote with a whip. So basically, if you behave really well for the next 6 months, we're going to let you have the whip back, which is quite an interesting technique. What did you think of that?
My take on it is that the Parliamentary Labour Party leadership will be very happy if after 6 months this gang say, actually, we quite like not having the weapon and doing our own thing. Now, they may come back, they may not. Let's see. We've seen quite a few of them supporting, even with mood music, if not actually supporting amendments, things that the Green Party are saying, aligning with them on certain issues. So I think, there is a rump from the Corbynite years who are to the left of the current leadership of the party who are in this gang. It was a relatively performative rebellion because we're pretty sure that the 2-child cap will be lifted by Labour at some point in the future.
I saw some of the tweets that went out and they were a little bit, well, I voted to save children from poverty, unlike the rest of Labour. And it's like, there's no one in Labour that doesn't want to lift the 2-child
So
cap. You all agree on that. The question is, when can we afford to do it?
That drives me mad about discourse around all of this, which is the idea that if an MP votes a certain way, it must mean they want children to die or they want poor people to not. Which, if you really think about it, is nonsense. They are human beings. There's a whole raft of reasons why people vote the way they do. And so this sort of performative, I kept seeing things like, well, tell me how these lot are any different to the Tories. It's like, well, Jesus, come on, guys.
And I mean, even that I think is okay, actually. In a big tent party, I think there's room for that. But there are like three kinds of votes where it's not allowed in any way, shape, or form: a budget, a King's Speech, and a confidence vote.
Yeah.
Those three votes are considered like ultra 3-line whip.
Yeah. Which is why it was performative.
Against,
it was
voting against means you will lose the whip. Like, you can bet your house on it. The whip was apparently going around telling journalists before the vote that he had the letters ready and would just fill in the names. Like, everyone knew this was going to happen. And to me, it kind of confirms something which I find really sad, because I am from that side of politics. I want more radical policies. I want Starmer to be pushed on this stuff. But it confirms to me that rump of the party, they don't know how to exercise influence. They don't. They think that jumping up and down and stamping their feet will get them the thing they want, precisely as they did in 2017 and 2019.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem there's an interesting consensus. There doesn't seem to be much bridge building. It's as you say, performative.
Yeah.
It's this sort it's making a stand about something. But actually, if you genuinely want to change something, you have to be able to collaborate.
They're comfortable basically with being opposition, and so they have made themselves opposition again, which is just bizarre. 2 weeks after being elected, but there we go.
I read the list of people who had rebelled, and it was Richard Bergen, Rebecca Long Bailey, and John McDonnell. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm back in 2017. Yeah. It was like names I have not heard for a while. I was like, wow, old school. It was old school.
Old school.
Yeah, I liked it.
Quiet, Riot. It's time for Naomi and Alex to bumble and humble and mumble their way through the never ever successful week in 60 seconds.
Thanks for that vote of confidence.
In 3, 2, 1, go.
Joe Biden finally withdrew as the Democratic nominee for the presidency, knocking Donald off the front pages and sending the Twitter sphere into meltdown over the correct pronunciation of Kamala.
And in other retirement news, injury believer tennis player Andy Murray announced the Olympics will be his last tournament.
Strictly Come Dancing is, however, not retiring and will return this year despite allegations of bullying and harassment from celebs about their dance part.
But the Legionella-filled Baby Stockholm barge is being put out to pasture and will officially close in January 2025. Hurrah!
Despite retiring from her PhD to have children 75 years ago, 98-year-old physicist Rosemary Fowler received an honorary degree from the University of Bristol for discovering the kaon particle.
Sharks off the coast of Brazil have tested positive for more than a few particles of cocaine, in many cases 100 times more than previously found in other aquatic animals.
And speaking of sharks, Tesla boss Elon Musk says the electric car maker will start producing and using humanoid robots from next year.
The Bidens, the Clintons, the Obamas, Nancy Pelosi, Bernie Sanders, George Clooney, Katy Perry, Cher, Barbra Streisand, Ariana Grande have all endorsed Kamala Harris.
Liz Truss, Kid Rock, Hulk Hogan and Kerry Katona have endorsed Donald Trump. Stop the clock.
1 minute and 10 seconds.
Really? If I hadn't fluffed my one line, we'd have probably done that this time. That's good.
No, like 120%. Just play that again. 120%. It will come in at exactly 60 seconds. Now, it's really quite impossible to believe that it was less than 2 weeks ago that Trump was shot and most pundits declared, that's it, election over. 12 days later, we are almost at a place where we look at that photo of Trump and go, oh yeah, that happened. And click on the next coconut tree meme or brat dance edit. We all thought we could have a bit of a rest, frankly. That didn't happen. Instead, we're churning out emergency episodes more often than we did during our own election. So to help us through this, we have with us Patrick Flynn. Patrick works for a polling company called Focaldata that, I'm right in saying, combines AI technology to basically develop MRP techniques and things like that to take samples and apply them to larger demographics. And you've been doing quite a lot of work on the US election. You've been looking at it. You're kind of the US correspondent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like the UK has been very, very busy, so we've been very busy with that. But we're currently looking at our plans for the US, like as you mentioned, the AI stuff, we have basically, and just to explain it, we have like an AI tool which basically allows us to run focus groups of individual people, but on a mass scale. So that's really interesting and something that hasn't really been done before. And
so AI focus people.
Yes, so basically
the
AI will effectively run the focus group as a moderator, but with individuals.
Oh, so the individuals are real, but the moderator is AI.
Yes, the moderator is AI. Yes.
Oh, right. Are you considering the possibility of the moderator being real and the people being AI?
Yeah, I know. I'm very worried that it's going to put us all out of a job at some point.
And so in that scenario, is it a focus group or is it done on an individual basis? Can the respondents hear other respondents?
No, it's done on an individual level, which we think is better, because like one of the key issues you get with focus groups is often it becomes the loudest person in the room and everyone just kind of
dominates.
Says, oh yeah, I agree with that.
Group
thing. You don't really get much of an idea of the kind of spread of opinion. But this is really interesting, and it really gets you to like probe the opinions of people. Like I tested it out on myself, and like it like made me think about things that I hadn't even thought about myself as someone that works in politics. So I thought it's really, really interesting.
Oh, like? Give us a for instance.
Well, it basically just asked, during the election campaign, it would just ask me about like stories that I'd heard in the news.
Right.
And it just kept probing me about them. It was very interesting.
That's
but we're
fantastic.
kind of excited to debut that properly for the US and look at what the kind of range of public opinion is.
Okay.
I saw an Ipsos poll yesterday that has Harris leading Trump 44 to 42. Is that bearing out in the kinds of things that Focaldata are observing?
Yeah, we're still in the early stages of our work, but it definitely seems like Harris has kind of had a bit of a reset. Obviously, we need to see more polling data because this is just the one poll, but it looks like she's basically allowed herself to kind of create a clean slate here, and she's had a bit of a bump. Even her approval ratings have gone up as well.
And that was before her first big speech in Milwaukee. Yeah. Presumably that field was done the day before that. So I would imagine she'll have pulled ahead even further because that really was a stonking speech. I don't know if any of you guys caught it.
I watched it from you posting it.
Yeah.
It's a very different energy to Biden and Trump, actually. There's a sort of playfulness and joy.
And you know what?
And warmth.
And different to Clinton. She has a natural warmth that Hillary doesn't have. Hillary's got a lot of authority and, credibility and is a fantastic politician in her own right. But the warmth that Kamala gives off is really different.
I mean, that, of course, will be weaponized against her, right? They will say that she doesn't have the gravitas to deal with foreign policy and foreign leaders, that she's just an over-enthusiastic frat girl. Brat girl. Actually, I want to interject with a listener question, Diana, because first things first, can someone please explain to me the coconuts and brat memes?
Patrick, you're young. Go for it.
Oh, God, okay. So basically the coconut thing is, there's just this like viral video of Kamala Harris talking about, I think it's something that her mother used to say to her children about, you think you just fell out of a coconut tree. I actually have a T-shirt with that on. So,
you should have worn it.
Today. But yeah, it's basically about, as she says, existing in the context of everything that came before. It's just like one of those like viral, strange politician moments that kind of picks up and goes
for no
viral.
obvious reason.
No obvious reason, other than it's just a bit strange.
And speaking of accidental, and I think the slogan that accidentally fell out of her speech last night, that the crowd in Milwaukee start reciting back to her, is "We're not going back. We're not going back." Yeah. And she immediately realised that she'd stumbled on gold and joined in with them. And I think that now potentially has, the green light from the party to become one of the...
I mean, Patrick will know that, they will...
Test the destruction.
They will focus group test that.
Explain that to me. We're not going back. What is
to
that?
Trump.
We're
not going back. We're going to go to the future.
Yeah.
We're about hope.
Yeah.
We're about tomorrow. We're not going back.
Yeah.
And the crowd just erupt into "We're not going
great.
back."
That's so good.
It was not just Trump, actually. She was saying that Trump wants to take America back to when women didn't have rights, when black people didn't have rights, when, to that country.
Like any good slogan, it works on different levels.
We're going to move to the future. We're not going back. And the crowd started chanting, "We're not going back. We're not going back."
Well, it gives people something to vote for.
Yeah.
not just against Trump. It's you go, actually, that's something I can vote for. That's a vision that I'd be excited to vote for.
Yeah.
So the brat thing then.
Yeah.
What's that?
What is that?
Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I do know.
definitely
But
knows.
Come on, you take it. You take it.
Well,
Mary.
it's Charlie XCX, and when I was campaigning in Brighton Pavilion,
I mean, I'm with you, Ingrid.
I went into the Green Party HQ so I was campaigning for Sean Berry to hold the seat that Caroline Lucas was vacating, and they had posters that were bright fluorescent green with fuzzy green in lowercase font, and I went, have you just copied the Charlie XCX album cover for that? And they went, yes, because young people are ripping them out of our hands in the street. And we had done a big print run of all the normal Green Party font posters, and people weren't taking them. And everywhere you walked in Brighton, you were just seeing these. So
can you go back a step, because I see Ingrid looking at me like my grandmother looked at me when I walked into the Sony Walkman.
I'm so bad. So that was Charlie XCX, the album.
Yeah, so her the album cover.
I presume she's a very influential musician of some sort-ish.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, Patrick.
Yeah, like she's been more. I mean, she's had a few mainstream hits, but she's been more like underground kind of for the last 10 years. But now she's finally had a bit of
10 years.
I'd say she's.
I've definitely heard of her, but I thought she was like of the last 2 years.
No,
that's how old I am now. That anyone that's been around longer than 10 years.
Like, this album's gone to like number 2 or 3 or something.
Got you.
Yes, because it got kept off by Taylor Swift.
And so the whole concept of releasing the album now, and the album is called Brat.
The album's called Brat, yeah.
And so she's having her Brat Summer. Everyone's having their Brat Summer because they're listening to that soundtrack as a backdrop to their, like you had Hot Girl Summer. Yeah. So now we're in Brat Summer. And so Kamala campaign, Twitter banner and website and everything has now copied the Charlie XCX album cover front for the campaign as well. And they're really leaning into it.
But again, presumably that if you want to win, you need to appeal to a large you need to appeal to young people and women and all that. They now have a strategy. The Democrats, they have somebody that they can people mobilise because they're excited to vote for.
And Biden just couldn't have.
Yeah, exactly. He couldn't have had a Brat Summer.
Even ironically, I don't think he could.
Could Biden, Patrick?
No.
Could Biden? No. So
not without major injury.
I think just to like quash the enthusiasm a little bit, I do think like they need to be a bit careful. I think it's like quite common when brands and stuff get involved in memes that it kind of squashes the organic kind of.
Yeah.
So I think they need to be a bit careful.
Yeah. So Kamala Harris might end up attached to the singer rather than the other way around, basically. Exactly. Yeah. Is the Trump campaign going to have quite a lot of difficulty trying to adjust to this? Like I said, everything was very angry and po-faced and attacky.
Fight.
And now suddenly they've got this woman that basically her main vibe is
fun.
I'm so sorry, I just ran out of fucks. Is that going to be quite difficult for an angry man campaign to deal with? I
mean, I think you can definitely see that it's caught them off guard, and it's kind of strange that they hadn't planned for this. Like, I think it was... Well, I mean, to me, it was fairly obvious that Biden couldn't...
It had become
untenable.
Obvious, yeah.
But you can kind of see them like testing out attack lines on Kamala. They don't really have anything too solid at the moment. I'm sure that they're doing like cackling Kamala or something at the moment, which is good for alliterative purposes, but I'm not sure it'll catch on.
Yeah. I mean, even that, we were talking about it. We were DMing each other about it and going, I'm not sure, like the fact that she laughs a lot like an actual human being, and what surfaced were a lot of responses of people going, have you ever seen Trump laughing? And actually, there isn't like a single occasion of him actually laughing.
Because he's a psychopath.
And if he does laugh, presumably it's incredibly affected and sort of manic. Like,
well, laughing involves laughing involves two people sharing a viewpoint and having empathy and none of these things are things that Trump. I don't know.
No.
Oh, I like that analysis.
Yeah.
Actually, because he never lets the audience or the other person in, effectively. So how could they share
exactly
a joke?
And Patrick, there's been talk this week that Trump is already thinking, oh no, I jumped the gun by appointing JD Vance, whose speeches probably haven't gone the way they'd all hoped. Did we see any effect of the Vance appointment in Trump's polling pre the Harris announcement?
It didn't look like it. I just think, like, regardless of like ideological opinion, like, I just don't think he's a very good pick as a VP. I mean, if you kind of look back through history, the kind of general consensus is that vice presidential candidates are there to like fill the gaps of the main candidate,
Or bring
like,
over a
exactly.
demographic group that you don't appeal to.
Like, you look at like Obama picking Biden because of Biden's experience, and you know there's a big contrast between them. Like Trump picking Mike Pence in 2016, partly a question of experience, but also Trump had a big weakness in 2016 with evangelical voters, which Mike Pence kind of made up for. Biden picking Kamala Harris in 2020. I just don't really see the voter who wouldn't vote for Trump but would vote for JD Vance. So I think it's a bit of a bad pick for that reason.
Yes, I see what you mean. Or the other way around, actually.
Yeah.
And Harris now has the upper. By the way, we are so talking about her like it is a completely done deal. We should circle back and check in on that.
No, listen, we've gone from the election being lost to having a fighting chance. I'll take it.
Sure. I'm going to come back to you on that in a second, but she now has the upper hand in being able to pick her running mate, if indeed she is anointed as the Democratic nominee, and can react to the choice that Trump has made. Is there a world where he would or could dump Vance now? Does anyone know?
I don't think so.
It'd be just too toxic.
He's already been confirmed as the VP nominee, so I'm not sure as to what the exact process is. But I mean, it's not as if Trump doesn't have precedent for, you know, ripping up process and doing things differently.
Because there was talk of a legal challenge for Harris being now the top of the ticket. There was some rumblings in the Republican Party that they might challenge it legally, and basically the legal sages went as one. You can't do that because they haven't basically legally confirmed their ballot. There's no one formally on the ballot yet, so there's nothing to challenge. They can change their mind to the last minute. So I wonder if there is a cutoff date that's for all sides, or that it's basically after their respective conferences that they confirm legally who will be their ballot.
There's a lot of uncertainty, isn't there?
Yeah.
Generally around this whole situation, there are a series of precedents in a way that's very not that Trump and it's the Trump effect of, you know, would Biden have held on as long as he did if he hadn't felt he had to fight someone like him? And Trump, who knows what he could do? Yeah, and that's what's always a bit disconcerting, I think, is when people go, there's no precedent, we don't know what's going to happen.
And with a man who believes the rules just simply don't apply to him. As we record, there are, I believe, 104 days to go until the election, which is not a huge amount of time at all, really. I mean, that's a terrifyingly short space of time for a new candidate. So that lends itself to the argument that everyone just should rally around Harris now and back her. But I'd love all of your guys' views on whether the idea of a Harris coronation is actually very problematic for the Dems or not at all. You know, there will be some people.
I mean, everyone has rallied behind her, so you can't invent.
I don't mean within the party. I mean, you know, the wider electorate would sort of see that as a coronation.
I understand what you're asking.
It.
I think an open convention would have been a better idea. It would have kept more of the spotlight on the Democratic Party, introduced more of the people, including possibly her VP pick, to the country. So I agree it would have been better, but considering the avalanche of support that she's had, I mean, you can't invent opposition to her just because you would quite like a contest.
I think also, I mean, that would have been So the DNC is when end of August. That would be 2 months. I just don't think you can turn it around in 2 months. I think you can't introduce a new candidate. I know they're not entirely new, but to an American public, and go, this is the person you need to trust in over 2 months. I just don't think you can do it. I think they've had to do it this way, and I quite like a bit of ruthlessness if it's my side. I always think, yeah, great. You're getting on with what you have to do.
You can be the chief whip of Quiet Riot.
Yeah, there we go.
The disciplinarian Oliver.
I think they're still kind of umming and ahhing about the idea of a flash primary. Like in the first week of August, where there's a vote and everyone basically votes
a semblance
for
of
Harris because they've already declared
like a Russian election.
The thing, yeah, but I guess it gives you the figure. It gives you the actual figure of this many nominees.
Has Bernie Sanders endorsed her yet?
Delegates, rather. Yes.
He has.
Yeah, he has, much to the chagrin of Owen Jones.
I think there's also something to be said for psychologically. For her, if they were actually going to open it up to other nominations, I just think give her the chance to go. I am the pick. I have 3 months. I just to focus on the task at hand rather than the uncertainty of sort of within the Democratic Party of sort of throwing it open to nominations.
A contest is great because you have to campaign, and so the electorate in that fight gets to see who's actually the best campaigner, who's going to be able to take this to the nation. If they can do it effectively within the party, they can have a better chance of doing it on the bigger stage. But we just don't have time. I agree. I think with 100 days to go, every hour of her day needs to be focused on beating Trump, because the world cannot afford that man back in the White House.
So I just looked it up, and it's really weird. Bernie Sanders has said that he will work hard to elect Kamala Harris, but he's not endorsing her yet. I don't know what that means, if I'm completely honest. He's basically saying that he backs her as the nominee, but he has to see the detail of her policies in order to give her his endorsement. It's slightly batty as a position. Who do you think she should pick? Does anyone have any ideas or views about what her VP pick?
Or does the data tell us anything, Patrick, about who else might be?
I mean...
what state does she really need?
Well, when you look at the Electoral College, basically the allocation of votes has changed this time around. So Trump only needs to flip Georgia and Pennsylvania. If he wins those 2 states, along with everything else that he won in 2020, he's the president. That's it. He gets 270 and the Democrat will get 268. So potentially you'd want to look at who can help win those states. I mean, I think, going for... I mean, it's the obvious selection, but going for somebody who can help you win a swing state. So Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, has been one of the names touted. Arizona is a swing state, so that would be a decent pick, I guess.
Yeah.
And in terms of issues, I mean, we did an emergency podcast at the weekend on it. Go back and have a listen, guys, if you missed our interview with Mark Bergman, who is a big fish in the DNC. And we were talking about reproductive rights as just being the issue that can bring over a significant chunk of otherwise Republican voters to a Democrat presidential candidate. Are there any other topics other than that you think they need to lean into? Or is it such a polarised electorate now that there's very little else?
It's kind of hard to say what the election issues are even going to be in a few months' time, because everything moves so quickly. But I think on the economy, Harris is going to want to try and, if possible, distance herself from, while still celebrating the achievements of Biden, distancing herself overall from the Biden administration. That's one of the key issues where people still think that Trump was better for the country on the economy. So yeah, I think if that's the case and they see that as the weakness, they could go for someone who's got, a background in economics, or potentially they'll lean more into social issues like the election and kind of what Biden did in 2020 with the kind of soul of the nation.
And Ingrid, you've lived in the US.
I was there when Trump.
I was going to say, were you there for any of the previous elections?
No, I was just there for that one. I was there for when we voted to leave the European Union, and I was there for Trump winning. It was a very dark few months.
I'm sure.
A very, very dark few months, that. America's such a vast, huge, continent. So sort of trying to extrapolate in a way that it's hard for us to do here, and we're much smaller and there's much fewer of us. So I always think it's sort of the game, the mental game you play, trying to work out what people want and what people will vote for. It's just sort of, I mean, it's not impossible because that's your job, Patrick. That's what you're trying to work out. But because I didn't realise that the issue that she was a California senator was an issue, and that California is actually very unlikely, or that I don't think they've ever won a president. Has there been a Californian president?
Reagan, was he Californian?
Was he California? Yeah, okay. Do you know what? Let's cut that.
Yeah, I think it's to do with that state being in the bag.
Yes,
basically.
I see. What you're saying. Yes, exactly.
You wouldn't necessarily.
California is like her JD Vance. It doesn't bring her anything that she hasn't already got. I guess.
Yeah, in the same way that I guess you wouldn't pick a Republican nominee from, I don't know.
Wyoming.
Yeah.
Wyoming.
See, that's why I'm glad I like being on the show.
Although when the Bushes from
just
Wyoming.
learn so much, don't you?
Every day's a school
Or did
day.
they just have a ranch in Wyoming? My anxiety, I guess, and also my hope, is that elections are won on the granular level of this little county in this state, etc., etc. That's one way to win. But there is another way to win, which is to just sweep the whole country. And it seems to me that Harris might be better at the latter strategy of just getting everyone to be very enthusiastic, of winning the popular vote by such overwhelming numbers that it carries
that the Electoral College
states
follows
with it, which is, effectively how governments here tended to have changed from Conservative to Labour. Before the event, everyone goes, oh, but without Scotland, oh, but without this marginal constituency. But when it happens, it actually happens in a big way, and it sweeps loads of constituencies.
Is there anything to be drawn? I mean, our election that we've just had, and the sort of mathematical brilliance of the Labour targeting all the seats, thanks to Naomi. I'm going to say it was entirely Naomi.
It was.
Well, bravo.
She done it.
Yeah, I mean that's not what we're talking about in America, as in it's a very different kettle of fish.
Yeah, I think it's just such a different country, and it's just so much more polarized that I'm not sure the kind of like sweeps that we saw even in like the 80s when Ronald Reagan won.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that's really like a thing anymore.
Is the data reliable? Because I look at them and I look at the sample numbers, and they're like usually 1,000, and I think that would be considered quite low even for here. So how the hell are they extrapolating?
The US is a lot harder to poll and sample than the UK. Hispanic voters particularly are very hard to reach, as are like the very young and the very old. In the UK, we find very old voters quite hard to sample, but young people very easy. And Democrats tend to be more likely to engage with polls. One really interesting stat that I found recently was that one of the biggest predictors of support for Trump at the county level at the last election wasn't education, race, religion, it was COVID vaccination rate.
Right.
So that the more vaccinated a county was, the less likely it voted for Trump. But interestingly, whether someone gets vaccinated for COVID is quite highly correlated with trust in institutions and government, which in turn could make them less likely to answer polls.
And could be linked to education.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
when we looked at Leave Remain, everyone was like, oh, the young voted Remain, the old voted Leave, and that wasn't the correlator. The correlator was education, and young people were just more likely to have tertiary level education. We're going to wrap it up there for this section, I think. But before we go, I just wanted to plug Alex's Midnight Mass episode that came out a couple of days ago from when you're hearing this episode on Biden's decline and his health issues. And it is an incredibly emotive, personal and thoughtful solo expedition by Alex, and I commend it to your ears.
Thank you. Riot. Now, before we let our guest Patrick go, I'm determined to wring as much information out of him as possible. You will comply. So it's time for our regular feature, Poll the Other One. Do you see, Ingrid?
I think Patrick looks really unimpressed to the listeners.
Patrick, I happen to know that you pulled together Focaldata's big wash-up of the election, effectively, that diced the voting data by age, social grade, region, leave, remain, etc. What were like 2 or 3 things that really jumped out at you from that work?
One of the big things was the just remarkable efficiency of Labour's vote share, which I think was beyond even what anybody expected.
Yeah.
They, in raw numbers, they won fewer votes than Corbyn won in 2019 when Labour got absolutely demolished, and yet they've ended up with a whatever it is, 170 seat majority, just because of like the way that they targeted the particular seats and managed to win in the right places. That obviously is a benefit for them under this electoral system, but at the same time, it also means that they're starting from quite a low vote share, which means that any damage to that coalition could wipe it out quite quickly. Another thing is just how far back the Tories fell among Leave voters. We basically looked at our poll, and basically all the data that we collated during the election campaign, we then reweighted to the actual election result. And the Tories barely moved with Remain voters, but they dropped 42 points with people who voted to leave.
Wow.
So last time round they got 42 points. Last time round they got 75% with Leave voters.
Did all of that go Reform, or did some of it go Labour, or do we know?
Like a majority went to Reform. So Reform got about 27% with Leave voters, and Labour got 23, but Labour was up 10 with Leave voters. So basically they distributed across most of the parties, but Reform was the biggest benefactor.
And Patrick, can I ask you, have you done any going back to voters to see if they voted the way they told you they were going to vote immediately before the election?
No, not at the moment.
Because I've got some interesting data on that I'll be sharing on another episode soon. So maybe we'll get you back on and we can compare notes and some of that.
Yes, we are discussing a sort of
absolute nerd fest.
Cephology. We are discussing like getting 5 pollsters in a room and just doing a massive data nerd out. What else?
Let's have a look.
What about age? I think age interests me because
It's basically we found that the middle age voters in the kind of like, let's say 45 to 65 age group were.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No,
with the key swing voters among people who voted Conservative last time round. I mean, I'm going to do this visually, so apologies to the listeners. But basically, the Conservative breakdown of their voters last time is kind of U-shaped.
Right.
So they kept quite a few of their younger voters, lost most of their middle-aged voters, and kept most of their older voters.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's basically the middle-aged voters were the key kind of swing demographic. What's also interesting is that Labour, despite winning the election heavily, actually went backwards with under 30s. So Labour's kind of age curve has also flattened as well.
Yeah, because I presume there was unhappiness about Gaza, and a lot of them went to Greens, Independents, etc.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Thanks, Patrick. We release you.
Lisa Nandy is the newly anointed Secretary of State for Fun, heading up the Ministry of Culture, Media and Sport. It's surely the job that every government politician really wants. You get to go to gigs, you get to go to matches and big ticket productions, but of course there is a bunch of important stuff too. The department oversees libraries, cultural renewal, gambling regulation, museums, the National Lottery, and the biggie, media ownership and regulation. Nandy predecessors include such political luminaries as Matt Hancock and Nadine Dorries.
Oh, God.
It is good
I'd
career
forgotten
advice.
Hancock had done it.
Yep. It is good career advice to always follow failure. But with Brexit still inhibiting the creative industries on a profound scale, rumours emerging about whether the new government will or won't back a second Leveson inquiry into phone hacking and more, and a major review of football clubs underway, we thought we would triage Lisa Nandy's to-do list. Ingrid, there is barely a creative industry your career hasn't touched. Radio, TV,
dodgy.
Hollywood, treading the boards, OnlyFans, no, not OnlyFans, writing, directing.
I thought this was gentler politics. What happened?
Lisa is your minister. So I guess a really big question right at the top. What do you think is the single most impactful thing she can do to support the creative industry?
I mean, probably money. I think that's always
Yep.
the single biggest thing that anyone can do.
Do you mean like Arts Council funding?
I mean,
or...
yeah, I mean that's the problem, isn't it? It's been cut back from every sector that arts gets funding from, whether that's Arts Council or BBC or
National Lottery,
it's
BFI
local
grants
government
or...
grants. It's all been cut back since 2008, 2010, more specifically.
And you were telling me before we came on air that you know people that have won awards in recent years for their work, now having to take on
second jobs.
Yeah,
I mean, producers, and I mean the industry that I work in is in a really dire state, and people genuinely can't afford to live. And retraining and doing completely different things. I read an article the other day about a gentleman who'd been a producer and who's now working as a postman, which is obviously a very noble job, but it's not what he wants to do. Yeah. And yeah, it's quite bad. The shadow Minister for Culture was Thangam Debonair, and she obviously lost her seat. So Lisa Nandy has slightly been parachuted in and hasn't had as much time to get her head around the brief as some of the other ministers who were shadow and now are in government. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know. I really like Lisa Nandy as a politician. I always have done, but I don't know what her take is on the arts and what her if there is a passion there for the arts. You always hope that the minister that's sort of dealing with your particular area is going to have a passion for it. Chris Bryant, I know, is very passionate about it. I went to a thing at the House of Lords the other night. Listen to me, get me. And it was a campaign for the arts. Have published some stats about the state of the creative industries in conjunction with the University of Warwick, and he was there to sort of talk about his passion for the arts and how he and Labour believe that it's one of the most important industries in our country and it needs help. So that was
Is Starmer going to say you've got to do drama to A level?
Yeah. Yes, he should, and he should, and we'd be in a better place if he did.
I think that's part of it. Part of what I have found very encouraging is the noises that have come out of Bridget Phillipson in the education brief, talking about
review of the curriculum.
Talking about a curriculum that's not just maths and English, because that's not the only thing that actually prepares you for life, for professional life, any kind of it.
GCSE and podcasting.
I mean, why not? And one of the things I wanted to ask you, Ingrid, as an insider, I guess, is
you're not.
No, but that's why I want to ask this question. Like loads of, I would say, the second tier venues, loads of them have disappeared. Because loads of the smaller ones, fringe, are very easy to bounce back after the pandemic because, they're just rooms above pubs. They don't have massive overheads.
There's a name. It's called the something circuit. I'll look it up while you two talk.
And the big venues, I mean, on the way here today, there was a matinee of Hello Dolly with Imelda Staunton, and it was like an over 60 gay man's convention outside. I've never seen so many people queuing up for anything.
Yeah,
to be honest. So they're obviously doing well, but these middle venues, loads have been lost, and they're difficult to stand up again because they do need funding. They don't impose on students to work for free so they can put shows on. They pay people.
Yeah.
And is there a sense in which there needs to be some systemic change, some bringing together, like the lottery money and the Arts Council money and the film money? Does it make sense to have all these different bodies awarding tiny grants?
I mean, that I can't answer. But what I will say is that it's tricky. I mean, post-COVID, we haven't returned. Audience numbers have not returned to what they were, and so with these medium-sized venues, there are other things at play. Running inflation, running costs, and ticket prices. People can't afford them. All of those things. some people go, well, this is not a viable business anymore. People don't go to the theatre. People don't go to the cinema. Why should we be funding things that people aren't doing? And I just think that's very short-termist. I despair at the idea that we're heading towards a society where people don't. Everything is individualised. We're all on our phones. We select what entertainment we want to watch on our own in our homes. We don't go to these communal places anymore. Having been in theatre for the last month in Stratford, the joy, having people in a room together experiencing something is so incredibly powerful. It makes me slightly want to cry a little bit.
Yeah.
And in fact, it made people in the room cry. The audience, it was because the piece was about consensus as well. I think that was something they hadn't seen reflected back to them for quite a long time, and it was quite about warring sides coming to an agreement, which is very moving in itself. But sort of people were crying, and there were tickets that were subsidised for young people, and so tickets were very cheap. And actually, the RSC I think gets state funding as well. So the maximum ticket prices I think is about £55. Yeah. Which is not nothing, but it's not the 200 and something pounds they are in London.
Yeah.
And so the importance of being able to experience things as a group, I don't know whether that's just something the government has. I don't think you can just ask the government to spend loads of money on keeping medium-sized places open and hope that'll be enough. You have to address the bigger thing around it, which is encouraging people to do things communally. And I don't know how you do that, but sort of, just by giving them the options, by letting them experience those things and seeing how wonderful they are.
I agree with you completely on the congregational element. And I'm not a huge football fan, Alex is, but I do occasionally go. And when I do, my friend is a gooner with a season ticket, and I get to go when he can't.
Is it Keir Starmer?
It isn't. And it is somebody in politics, though. And the occasions that you are surrounded by thousands of other people.
She's desperate to drop that name. Look at her, she's smiling.
Chanting and celebrating together now that we are no longer a church-going nation that congregates on a Sunday. There is something incredibly moving and powerful about it, and intergenerational. So I can imagine exactly that same feeling on the football terraces as when you're in the moving theatre production audience. And your production, I did go and see it, and everyone should go and see it when it comes to London. It was immersive for some because there were seats for the audience that were actually around the negotiating table of the climate accords, and so they were sat shoulder to shoulder with the cast during that. The sense that they must have had in those seats would have been so incredibly powerful. How do we do that? I mean, when I was at school, I was growing up in Northern Ireland, where we could have music lessons for free. So every child got taken into a room full of musical instruments on day one at school. You could pick them up, try them all out, and then get matched to one. And as long as you went to orchestra every Saturday morning, which was a pan-regional orchestra bringing together all the schools, Catholic and Protestant, then you got a free music lesson and a loaned instrument for your entire educational career. And making music with other people meant that we crossed the divides. We would never, have been allowed to play with each other in the street because we were from different sides of a divided community. But in that moment you could, and it was wonderful. And I'm desperately sad that young people don't get to experience that anymore in the same way, unless they are from privileged homes where the parents can afford to fund all of that privately.
Yeah, I mean, even in this industry, actually working in this industry, people who don't have, a supportive family or savings, you can't exist in it, because it's a freelance existence anyway. But and contracts have been squeezed, and it's just harder. You can't make a living anymore, and we're in a parlous state, and I don't know how you change it.
The thing that I think has changed is that there used to be a sort of ecosystem around theatre. Where you had, there was some theatre on television, there was some theatre on radio, it was on the syllabus, so it was everywhere, and people got to know what theatre is. And my sense is that there's a whole chunk of people that just don't know what theatre is. They've never been on that kind of night out. They see it as a sort of chore, as something that's maybe not for them.
Elitist.
Or elitist or worthy or whatever. and we need to revive that ecosystem, because that ecosystem is there, you know, for like gigs are full. The tickets are flying out the door, and they're more expensive than ever.
Agreed. And actually, so in terms of what can Lisa Nandy do, apart from the financial side of things, which is obviously it's not down to her. How the money is spent particularly. It's the conversation around arts, which feels like it for the last 14 years has been polluted.
Yeah.
And again, sort of polemicised, and the idea that if you know, the attacks on the BBC, all of that, and the Nadine, I'm thinking particularly the Nadine Dorries era, which was particularly fun.
Trigger warning.
But that thing of arts are for the elites, or you know, Dominic Raab taking the piss out of Angela Rayner for going to the opera. Yeah. And that kind of anti-arts, as though arts are somehow snobbery.
Can I just ask, look, we're in 2024 now, is there a place in what you're talking about for the theatre of YouTube, the theatre of TikTok, the places where kids now have huge access to the ability to perform to potentially infinite audiences in their own way? Is there an opportunity there, or is that all threat?
Listen, I am an old woman, and I'm terrified of anything new and modern and technology and AI and all of it. So I'm not best placed to say whether it's a threat or not. I don't think you could call it a threat, because it just is. It is what it is. But I really want children, young people, all of us actually, to be reminded of the fact that the live experience is unlike any other experience. I think post-COVID, I think people are wary of being in a room. I'm still slightly wary of being in a room with hundreds of people. It's definitely,
it still feels quite weird.
It's definitely still a hangover of it. So hopefully, the further we move away from that, you know, in terms of years, that will.
And there is just this individualization of everything at the moment. But my fear for the thing like TikTok and performing there is that you're not collaborating much with somebody else. There is another podcast that discusses entertainment with two very impressive presenters, and this week they talked about the number of bands
Who could you mean
that have charted in the top, have held the number one spot in the charts versus solo artists, and they tracked it from the 60s, 70s, 80s. Obviously, in the 80s, you had like weeks, hundreds of weeks throughout that decade where bands, whether it was Pet Shop Boys or Duran Duran or whoever, held the top spot. In the noughties so far, and we're halfway through this decade, they were saying there have only been 3 weeks so far that a non-solo artist has held the number. No. And one of those was, an old song revived. Stand-up comedy, and you mentioned gigs earlier, tickets do fly off, but that is, one person having written their very personal, individualised thing. We don't spend the money on big performances with a big cast in the way that we used to. We focused a lot on theatre. Of course, DCMS is very, very wide. It covers sports, it
libraries,
covers
and
TV and film and everything. And of course, we know that the budgets have been cut for many of them as well, and a lot of that funding. We cannot not talk about Brexit, though. It's not the only issue. It is a big part of it. And a huge part of that being mobility and the ability for touring artists to be able to do a tour that lasts longer than 90 days if they don't have an EU passport. I know somebody that runs a theatre group, and she literally has to tell her performers, can you holiday outside of the EU so that we can use your 90 days for your, so they are now having to go on holiday to Turkey, Morocco, America, wherever, and not step foot in France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Netherlands, wherever they may be going on tour, which is nuts. So my big plea, and if I was looking at her to-do list, I would be saying, please, please, please consider at least a youth mobility scheme for the 18 to 35-year-olds, a reciprocal scheme of the EU to allow that freedom to work across
I would
border.
also say a sort of carnet of usable at any time over the next however many years things, because for session musicians, I mean, this has been an utter disaster, because before
makeup artists,
they would get a call
models,
from an orchestra in Frankfurt that says our second violin is unwell, and we know that you know this piece of music because you played it with this conductor before. Can you fly in for tonight? You know, all of that used to happen a lot. And now they're saying they just don't even pick up the phone to someone British because it's so complicated that it's not worth it. It's not worth it as an emergency solution. So they've lost like 30% of their work.
It's so upsetting. Listen, I'm very upset about it, so I can't think about it anymore. But
you've got an EU passport.
And do you know what I was about to say? It's even stopped me being able to star in an episode of Tatort in Germany. But actually, I do have a German passport, so I'm all right.
I'm all right.
I'm
Jack.
fine. But can I do this? Because
please,
you mentioned my husband, so I'm going to use.
I didn't. I didn't. You're hearing your own right.
You mentioned my husband, so I am going to take a play out of his playbook. Which is to do like a top. It's not like a top three. I'm going to give you some stats.
Go for it. I want them.
Well, no. So this is okay. The UK, as a share, if you sort of compare European countries, the share of GDP that we spend on our arts and cultures compared to other European countries, out of 25, this is the campaign for the arts stats. Where would you say that we would rank out of 25?
Percentage of GDP spent on the arts.
Percentage of GDP spent on the arts.
Mid-table, maybe?
No.
Oh, where's Alex going?
Penultimate.
Do you know what? It's slightly better than that. We're number 22.
Okay.
The only people below us are Italy and Greece. Alex, I'm so sorry to say.
No, I fully believe that.
Who do you think spends the most in Europe on
Brussels?
No. Listen, we can edit. If there's too many guesses, we can.
No,
Ireland.
No. I'm going to go for.
I would say the first.
I'm going to go for Poland.
Do you know what?
Or Czechoslovakia.
I would say the first.
Czechia.
The top two. The first one is quite surprising. Number one is quite surprising.
Okay.
But maybe when we explain why it's number one, it might be not as surprising. But number two, I'd go. Yeah, this country feels like a country that values its citizens. Its arts. It's arty. It's Iceland.
Wow.
Is number two.
Oh, right.
But also, to be fair to them, they've got they don't have that many people, and it's quite a high GDP. But
is
they
it
also
GDP per capita?
It's but even in GDP per capita, GDP per capita, they are number one.
Okay.
This is as a share of GDP. The number one is Hungary.
But
apparently
there's
a lot of money into.
No, but I thought it would be former
and
Eastern
they've
Bloc
built quite a few new venues as well. I think they build new music venues and opera houses and things.
Yeah, but
investing in Hungary as a brand.
But Orban has quite a tight grip on that spending.
Yes.
So he's actually using the arts for propaganda.
Exactly that. So listen, it's a tale of two halves. There's a silver lining. So what we need is a really autocratic government to invest, and that is the solution.
Yes. An autocratic government for like 6 months, and then we overthrow them.
But our spending is really, really, really poor compared to most of Europe, and that needs to change.
I've got one last question. We have a Labour government now. I can't get tired of saying that, actually, after 14 years of not being able to. And that means there are a lot of affiliated unions who represent the creative arts. You've got the musicians' union, etc. Will that make a difference to how this government views the arts, or will it have very little impact because it's hard to be a prophet in your own land? Thoughts?
I mean, I think there's already a big difference to how this government sees the arts. You hear it in everything they say. So it really is preaching to the choir. Now, some of it, as Ingrid says, is about money, and money is tight at the moment. So you're never going to have Labour backbenchers rebel and lose the whip because they're demanding more money for the Arts Council. Because there's other stuff on the priority list that will always be higher. So we need to concentrate on the other half of the equation, which is about a supportive environment in terms of regulation, seed money, because the arts are actually quite good at paying for themselves. Once you give them a little bit of money, they're very good at generating jobs in their area. And so my approach would be to say, if you want to revive the high streets, which is like top of the list for them, if you want to regenerate towns, if you want to level up the north, the way to do it is to put like a venue in that high street, because around it will spring restaurants and cafes.
Access to libraries.
Yeah.
I mean, libraries, 50% funding cut since 2010. 50%. Which is, and libraries to me are one of the most important things in a community.
I agree.
I mean, genuinely, and if we were talking about opportunities for people outside London and the Northwest, that's, yeah.
And often they can be multi-use spaces now. So
Yeah.
you can have a library that's also an art space. So that would be my approach. My approach would be to tie it into something, a mission that's already very high on their
Levelling
list.
up, yeah.
And say, look at what a small venue, a multi-use arts centre library does to the centre of a town. This is the way to do it.
Okay, we're going to go for a call to action very, very quickly. I've got a couple. Please, Ingrid, Alex, Kenny, throw in any others that you might have. Go to the theatre, go to the cinema, go to a gig, buy tickets, get out there if you can afford to. If you can't and you want to help, then please do sign up to Best for Britain for free, bestforbritain.org/join, and you will be able to help us lobby the government for that youth mobility scheme to help touring artists and a whole host of other things. And if you work in the creative industries, make sure you're a member of the union.
Join a union. Do we need a podcasting union?
Probably.
I think we should have a podcast.
I think it's covered in
NCJ.
in various other unions.
Yeah, I was looking at it actually, but it's not easy to define. It depends on what you classify yourself as, basically. But it would be quite interesting to have.
But also with those sort of nascent industries, and no one knows what's happened. Everyone sort of scrambles to sort of legislate, but sort of 10 years after it's not.
And we haven't talked about the press, but we will. We'll bring it forward to another episode in the next couple of weeks because there is a lot of stuff to discuss about press regulation. And now it is time for your favourite regular feature, where Indiana Jones-like we explore the temples and caves to discover those doom artifacts of wokeism. It's time for Wokey Dokey.
Wokey Dokey. Wokey Dokey.
Naomi, what have you got for us?
Well, do you own a pet?
I do.
Ingrid, do you own a pet?
Yeah, I'm about to get another one.
What pet?
Oh, hello.
What pet do you currently own?
A cat.
What pet do you currently own?
2 cats.
Then
This
You're
is like
woke.
a bidding.
you're woke. You're woke.
I'll see your cat.
I knew that anyway. Yeah.
I'll raise your cat.
2 cats. So the Sun has branded cat owners who put their pussies on a leash as woke, rather than just plain old bizarre or cruel. The RSPCA has reported a rise in the purchase of cat leads as owners try to take their moggies on walkies, and say it can cause feline anxiety because cats prefer to roam freely. So the extension of the Sun's logic is that anything deemed animal cruelty is now, in fact, woke. So I'm really looking forward to them.
So there are 4
Yep.
cats on leash.
They are for freedom. Cats
But
should
not
be free.
for cats.
No,
Oh,
no, no,
they
no.
are for
They are.
freedom.
They're for. It's the woke owners putting the cats on a lead. They don't like.
I used to have a cat. I had a cat who I had a small flat in Deptford and with no outside space. So I did buy a lead, I'm going to be honest. And I thought it would be less cruel to take her for a walk because she had been a rescue kitten, so she had been grown up on the streets,
Right.
on the main streets of southeast London. And I thought I'm going to
How
walk
did that
her.
go for you?
It didn't go great. But you know what? Then I stopped doing that.
Exactly.
So,
So the extension of the Sun's logic here is that anything deemed animal cruelty is and now in fact woke. So I'm really looking forward to them branding fox hunters, industrialised farmers, non-vegans, the Grand National, fishermen as woke.
That is amazing. What other pet are you getting? Another
a cat, another cat,
Yay.
which I'm going to take out for walks on leads.
Cats do love another cat's company.
No.
Like,
Famously, I don't think they do. But
no, they do.
Oh, great,
They,
that's what
they
I heard
do
then.
if they get along. I mean, no, you have to literally
If
try
was
them.
doing a lot of work in that one.
Some cats get along, some cats don't.
Yeah.
Are they
we're really nervous.
boy, girl?
No, they're girl, which apparently is supposed to be boy, girl, but it's girl with their girl.
Okay.
They're gentle. They'll be fine.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
Yeah. I mean, I got mine from the same litter, the they're brothers, and so they've grown
a bonded
up together.
pair.
Your cats have the best name for cats I've ever heard. I think about them every so often.
Freddie Mercury and George Michael.
I mean, that is genuinely brilliant.
And listeners, if you stumble across anything that we need to add to the list of wider woke activities, you can leave all the digging to us and send us any wokery you find to quietriotpod@gmail.com.
And that is all we've got time for this week. So, without further ado, it is time to say a huge thank you to somebody I really hope, and if you agree with me, listeners, tweet her about it and email us about it. All right, find her somehow. Become a regular.
You're on Instagram,
You've got to become a regular on Quiet Riot. Ingrid.
Oh my God!
Thank
You
you
one
so
inch. You give
much.
an inch and they take a mile. That
Are
is
you on
unbelievable.
Instagram? Are you on Instagram?
I am on Instagram. Yeah, I came off
There you go.
Elon Musk's Twitter X in a.
We're gonna set our followers on you on Instagram.
Great.
Is it at Ingrid Oliver?
Why would I tell you that now? It is.
I can just Google
it is
it.
at Ingrid Oliver. Yes. But thank you. It's been an absolute joy. It's been really great. Like I say,
It's like you were never not
never
here.
gone.
It's kind of emotional.
I feel a bit rusty,
actually.
but we'll get back
It
on it.
didn't show
little
like a
bit
true
emotion.
performer.
A
You've got to
little
work.
emotion.
Let's go for a drink.
And if you're the social media type, please follow us at Quiet Riot Pod or drop us an email to quietriotpod@gmail.com. And do tell your friends to tune in. Do share things about us on social media because the algorithms are so genuinely impenetrable now. Like if you post something 10 times, 5% of your timeline of your followers will have seen it. So keep posting about us. Whatever it is you're doing, it's working, and we thank you for it.
Thank you very, very much. And we'll be back again very soon. Bye-bye.
Quite Right is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreu and me, Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canalou. Quite Right is a co-production with Sandstone Global. See ya!
But thank you for having me back again.
We haven't finished yet. Got another section.
Is it? You can snip that.
Got
I've forgotten how to do it. I don't know what a
Wokey Dokey.
microphone is.
We've got Wokey Dokey to go.
Shepherd's Crook.